Tonight on Reporting Scotland, claims that children and young people are being put at serious risk by a lack of mental health care.
You weren't guaranteed to see the same person twice. You're going to be telling your story over and over again and you're not going to get anywhere with it.
My eating disorder was spiralling out of control. I went for help. It was 5 months before I had to got a letter through.
Also on the programme, survivors of sex abuse raised concerns about the man the Scottish Football Association has appointed to chair its inquiry into abuse in the sport. A teenage boy who went missing in Edinburgh dies just hours after he was found. The tiny parasites that are causing big problems for our farm salmon industry. And on Valentine's Day, are we falling out of love with Gretna Green? Good evening. It's believed half of mental health problems begin before the age of 15. However, some young people are waiting more than a year to access a mental health service specifically designed to help them. Unlike the rest of the UK, Scotland has no national strategy for school-based counselling services. Charities and youth organisations say there's a postcode lottery of provision and that the service, called CALMS, has consistently failed to meet its waiting time targets. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers reports.
I had two parents that were both drug addicts.
Courtney Gemmell says her mental health problems started at the age of 12.
Everything just seemed to get worse. I was struggling with panic attacks and I was taking them quite a lot.
Over coffee with fellow members of the Scottish Youth Parliament, she talks of losing both parents to drug addiction and the struggles trying to get help.
I had accessed CAMS once and I didn't go back. You weren't guaranteed to see the same person twice. You're going to be telling your story over and over again and you're not going to get anywhere with it because you're going to be feeling everything. Every emotion that you were feeling before that happened, you're just going to be feeling it again.
Around this table, they share similar experiences.
I'd seen things at 10 years old that no child should ever have had to have seen in their life.
I was brought up to just deal with my issues, like bottle them up, stay quiet about it.
I've suffered with an eating disorder for quite some time and that's been a battle, and that battle I've still not gotten over, and that's something that I live with still today.
Erin Macaulay got support at school but felt stranded when she got to university.
And my eating disorder was spiralling out of control. I went for help. It was 5 months before I had to got a letter through, and I never went to my appointment because by that point I'd finished my exams and I was moving to Glasgow for the summer.
The Scottish Government's own targets for counselling services have been missed ever since they were introduced. Most recently, they show that 22% of those referred to CAMS were not seen within 18 weeks, and 708 children waited more than a year to be seen by a counsellor.
CAMS is oversubscribed, it's difficult to get a quick appointment, and the thresholds are pretty high, so you have to be quite distressed, in quite a state, quite ill, to get to CAMS at the moment.
This is Carmen oil, and
this is the sort of early intervention that can make a difference. Cowdenbeath Primary School funded their mental health kit bags.
Today I'm feeling orange because I'm kind of feeling a little bit angry, but I'm also mostly feeling really, really happy. Does anyone else want to cry?
Local authorities say budget pressures have led to a lack of psychologists and support staff. The government says it's investing in services to meet targets, but say it's up to councils to do more in schools.
Yes, it is a postcode lottery. There are some local authorities who have got great mental health and wellbeing strategies already in place in their local authority areas. So, we're not starting from a 0 point. There are good practices in many local authority areas. We just need to make sure that that is uniform throughout the country.
Back at the cafe, these young people say it helps them to talk. Now they hope it'll help others too.
You start now in primary school and secondary school, and then in generations to come, you're not going to have the continual problems.
Young boys need to feel that they can talk about their feelings.
The more that we speak about it and the more I hear other people's stories, it begins to give me hope for our future.
Lisa Summers, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
A 13-year-old boy who was found in Edinburgh after going missing over the weekend has died in hospital. Police say Blake Ross, who's believed to have had diabetes, fell ill on a bus in the city centre on Monday evening. An investigation into police actions has now begun. John McManus reports.
Police now say that 13-year-old Blake Ross, who was living in care and who'd gone missing and had been missing since Saturday afternoon, was found ill on a bus, a number 4 Lothian bus, here in Leopold Place on London Road in the middle of Edinburgh on Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. The driver of the bus called the police when he discovered Blake was ill and also radioed into his own garage control room for help. Blake was taken to the Sick Kids Hospital in Edinburgh, but unfortunately he died on Monday evening at 9 o'clock. Police say the cause of death is unexplained, but we understand that it is linked to Blake's underlying health condition for which he was taking medication. Now, the number 4 bus, which Blake was discovered on, travels across Edinburgh from east to west on a route that starts not very far from where Blake was seen on Saturday afternoon at Howden Hall at around 3:30. Police would like anybody who knows anything about Blake's movements since Saturday afternoon to get in touch as they proceed with this investigation.
A charity which supports survivors of sex abuse is asking the Scottish FA to think again about the man they've appointed to chair their review of child abuse in football. The SFA announced earlier this month that Martin Henry would take on that role, but the charity say concerns have been raised about his suitability. Aileen Clark reports.
SFA match official Hugh Stevenson and Partick Thistle physio John Hart. Both men now dead, but the anger and concern that allegations they had abused young footballers were not dealt with properly is still very much present. The Scottish Government, currently running their own inquiry into abuse of children in care settings, urged the SFA to consider setting up a specific inquiry into abuse in football, as the FA in England has done.
To be more proactive in how we deal with the matters of child sexual exploitation. It's just a small issue.
The SFA agreed and earlier this month announced Martin Henry, here giving evidence to a Scottish Parliament committee, is the man who'll chair it. Mr Henry, they explained, has over 40 years clinical and forensic experience in the field of child and public protection and most recently was National Manager of Stop It Now Scotland, the national programme for the prevention of child sexual abuse. Mr Henry's biography, still on Stop It Now's website, states, Martin's professional expertise is in the investigation and assessment of child sexual abuse and in working with men who have problematic sexual behaviours, including those who offend online. It's the amount of work Mr Henry has done with offenders, which is concerning some abuse survivors.
Where logically, and we could look at it and say, yes, he's got the perfect background, he knows all about perpetrators, and he knows about prevention agenda, and he understands child protection. It's how it feels to survivors that I think is the main issue.
And how does that feel then to the survivors that have raised concerns with you?
Basically, they feel as if, it's somebody that doesn't really understand their needs. They're only going to understand the perpetrator needs, and it's, they don't feel that he's the right person to look into, what that means to survivors.
6 years ago in Edinburgh, the men at the centre of the largest child abuse network ever uncovered in Scotland were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. One of them, James Rennie, was jailed for a minimum of 16 years for sexually assaulting a baby, sharing pictures of that abuse and offering the child to others. James Rennie was the chief executive of LGBT Youth. Martin Henry was the convener of the board of LGBT Youth. Martin Henry was not involved in any way with Rennie's crimes, and youngsters who used the service were not among Rennie's victims. Police traced him after he sent a message to another paedophile from the LGBT youth offices. Some survivors believe, having not spotted a paedophile working in the same organisation, Mr Henry's position is weakened as chair of a wide-ranging inquiry.
In some ways you might see it as unfair to say that he can't be in that role because he didn't pick up on something that many of us probably wouldn't have picked up on. But again, it's just the whole nature of people having trust in this inquiry. It's about how survivors feel that's the most important thing. The most important thing for survivors to fully engage with the inquiry process is for them to trust in it.
We have tried to reach Martin Henry, but he's out of the country at the moment. An SFA spokesperson said that the Scottish FA consulted a wide group of stakeholders, including survivors' groups, in agreeing terms of reference for the independent review and the subsequent appointment of a chair. The chair has amassed unrivalled experience in many facets of child protection in a 40-year career, including his role as vice-convener to the Scottish Parliament cross-party group on survivors of sexual abuse. Janine Rennie and an abuse survivor met with the SFA yesterday, and she says that was a constructive meeting, but she waits to see how they respond to the concerns that they raised. This highlights the difficulty in appointing a chair to such sensitive inquiries that will be acceptable to all of those who wish to take part, especially those who have been abused. For them, the issue of trust is central. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Urgent safety checks should be carried out on hundreds of public buildings constructed after the year 2000. Well, that's according to the Royal Incorporation of Architects in Scotland, which says that a lack of scrutiny could put lives at risk. It follows the publication of a report which raised concerns about building standards at 17 schools in Edinburgh. Well, our correspondent Andrew Kerr is in the centre of Glasgow for us tonight. Andrew, and a stark warning from the architects.
Yes, it is indeed, Jackie. A very stark warning from the architects. They're saying do not underestimate their report because lives are at risk here. Now, I'm standing in front of one architectural gem, the City Chambers, belonging to Glasgow City Council, of course. Well built, well maintained, standing here since Victorian times. But the architects are laying down a challenge to every local authority, every health board, every public body in Scotland. You need to carry out safety checks on public buildings that have been constructed since the year 2000. Now, this is in the wake of the Cole report, which was commissioned after that incident at Oxgangs Primary in Edinburgh in January 2016, when one wall collapsed, sending 9 tonnes of masonry crashing down. Defects were found in another 16 schools, of course. So the architects are saying that's why it's very important that checks must be carried out, because it would be naive to assume that there aren't similar problems in other buildings right across Scotland.
But the architects' proposals, Andrew, they're also being seen as quite controversial.
Yes, it is quite a controversial proposal, and I think the main criticism that could be levelled at the architects is that this is essentially a job creation scheme for them, and I put that to the Royal Incorporation of Architects when I spoke to them earlier, but they're saying, well, that's not true. Their main priority is public safety, and they're saying that quantity surveyors, engineers and indeed architects can all be called on to carry out these specialist checks, quite invasive checks on these buildings, and they're saying that local authorities and public bodies must now muster all these specialists to carry out these checks, because, Jackie, it is indeed a very stark warning, a very real challenge for public bodies in Scotland.
Thank you very much, Andrew. 2 footballers ruled to be rapists by a judge in a civil action have begun an appeal process which could lead to a full legal challenge against the finding. Former Dundee United teammates David Goodwillie and David Robertson were ordered to pay agreed damages of £100,000 to Denise Clare following a hearing at the Court of Session. Neither man faced a criminal prosecution and both claimed sex with Miss Clare had been consensual. Both men are applying for legal aid for the appeal process. The price of Scottish farm salmon is standing at a record high. That's partly because of demand, but also because the supply is in trouble. It's due to sea lice, a parasite which has become a serious problem for the industry, particularly in Scotland. Our business and economy editor Douglas Fraser has been to Lochaber to find out some more.
Scottish salmon sells on a clean, pristine environment. Fish grown here, close to Glencoe, could be exported to 50 countries. Demand's leaped and so has the price because supply has dropped. And that's mainly because of this. Sea lice. They float in on the tide or carried on wild fish.
With warming waters, they're becoming more of a problem. They've become resistant to the chemicals used in fish food to combat them. They're very hard to eradicate. And for growing salmon, they make them more vulnerable to disease. So what can be done?
Options include chemical treatment. Marine Harvest, the world's biggest fish farmer, saw its use of hydrogen peroxide soar 15-fold over 4 years without getting on top of the problem. There are cleaner fish like this lumpsucker, which eats lice, a neat solution, long talked up but not yet working at scale, or a warm bath, which shocks the lice and knocks them off. But it's not that easy. Last year, on at least one occasion, it went badly wrong.
This was a new piece of equipment that we had acquired, and we tried it on one of our farms in Skye, and unfortunately we lost a lot of fish. We lost 460 tonnes of fish in that process.
So that's nearly 100,000 fish killed.
It's a lot of fish. It's a lot of fish, and it's extremely regrettable.
The evidence suggests that this is a problem that's got out of control.
No, I would disagree with that. We've got certain sites that will be worse affected than others with sea lice. Some farms have had very little impact from it at all. For us as farmers, the important thing is to monitor our fish on a regular basis, and that's what we do. But our aim, ultimately, is to use mechanical methods and to use cleaner fish to get rid of lice on our fish.
The tonnage of salmon produced last year slumped. Average fish size is down, many are slaughtered before an infestation of lice can take hold.
It is a serious economic problem just now, although prices for salmon is really high too, so most farmers doesn't have any big problem covering this additional cost. For the salmon industry, it's a much bigger challenge that they have a parasite that they cannot handle well now.
But what about the consumer? Will the lice put people off?
It's a natural phenomenon. It's all part of the natural process, albeit it's made more of because it's in the farming environment. But all livestock in farms, be they terrestrial or marine, are encountering some kind of either a parasite or a tick or whatever if it's sheep farming, and they're dealt with, and that's part of livestock farming.
Longer term solutions being considered include farming in disused and cleaned oil tankers or cages far out at sea and deep beneath the surface. It's a problem that will have to be sorted, and quickly, if Scotland's to hit the industry's new target of doubling salmon production within 13 years. Douglas Fraser, reporting Scotland, Lochaber.
It's 7:15. A reminder now of tonight's top story. Claims that children and young people are being put at serious risk by a lack of mental health care. And still to come, on Valentine's Day, have we lost that lovin' feeling for Gretna Green? One of the most high-tech archive centres anywhere in Britain has opened its doors in the Highlands. The £21 million nucleus complex in Wick has been purpose-built to house all the records, photos and film footage which document the development of the UK's civil nuclear industry. Craig Anderson went for a look.
Dominating the site at Dounreay on the northern coast of Scotland is the fast breeder reactor.
This is what the early days of Britain's nuclear power industry looked like. The construction of the Dounreay fast reactor in the 1950s placed Britain at the very leading edge of nuclear technology. But the history of this and other nuclear power projects is now being collected here, in this space-age complex in Caithness. Because the knowledge generated during the research, as well as at other sites like Harwell and Sellafield, remains highly valuable to scientists around the world.
Academics who are picking up the strands of research, that's some of it carried out here in Caithness, at Dounreay, and other companies and whatever it may be. But I think it's open to all.
And these records will also be vital for the engineers now tasked with dismantling the first wave of Britain's nuclear power plants. The Nucleus Centre will also provide a home for the historical records of the county of Caithness, stretching back centuries, with everything stored in temperature and humidity-controlled conditions.
These boxes here house the Dounreay photographic collection, but over several years, all of the archives from Britain's civil nuclear plants will be sent here. Now, that will create an archive which is priceless in scientific terms, but in social history terms, it'll be very valuable too.
Thurso was a small fishing town before the nuclear industry, and you could see the growth that took place in Thurso and ended up with 2,500 well-paid jobs in the area, which are going to be hard to replace, I have to say. But yeah, major queue, and some of the earliest innovations in the nuclear industry happened here.
Visiting scientists from all over the world have travelled thousands of miles to this remote corner of Scotland to see the Dounreay experimental reactor establishment.
Craig Anderson reporting Scotland, Wick.
Now let's take a look at stories from across the country. A £3 million teacher training fund has been announced by the Education Secretary. Speaking at a learning festival in Aberdeen, John Swinney pledged training for an extra 371 teachers at Scottish universities next year. At the start of this year, there were more than 500 teaching vacancies across Scotland.
This is a very strong boost to the recruitment of teachers within Scotland, and it builds on the recruitment campaigns that we've been taking forward to advertise the attractiveness of the teaching profession and to create new routes for individuals to come into teaching to undertake that transformative impact on the lives of young people in Scotland.
A union says the treatment of redundant oil workers being denied jobs in other industries is tantamount to blacklisting. BBC Scotland revealed yesterday that evidence has been passed to the UK government that some companies are specifically denying jobs to former oil workers because they might leave when the offshore industry recovers. The quality of care at an Aberdeen nursing home has been criticised as unsatisfactory by inspectors. A report by the Care Inspectorate found that some residents at Kingsmead nursing home had lost significant weight and that some staff were failing to treat people with dignity and respect. In certain cases, inspectors said residents were being treated like objects. Edinburgh trams are to be fitted with defibrillators as part of a campaign to save the lives of heart attack victims. Speedy use of the devices is said to increase survival rates by up to 75%. The machines can be used to help passengers on trams and can also be taken off to treat people. A song written by a teacher at Kinross High School with help from his pupils has failed to be chosen as Romania's entry for this year's Eurovision contest. Jason Blythe's song Tear Up the Dark didn't make it through the first heats. Well, football now, and Derek McInnes says he is completely focused on his job as the manager of Aberdeen. However, he's considered to be among the candidates to fill the vacant manager's post at Rangers, where he played in the 90s. He was asked if he could reassure Aberdeen supporters if he'd remain at Pittodrie for this season and beyond.
No, I think that for me, I think everybody sees how much I love this club and how much I enjoy my job. So the only guarantees and reassurance that I can give is that I give everything. The players will give everything. We've got so much to try and achieve here. So, how was your Valentine's Day? A card, chocolates, flowers, maybe a special meal with your loved one tonight? Or perhaps you got married? 23 couples tied the knot at Scotland's romance capital, Gretna Green. And as the country gets more and more secular, today was also a special day for humanist weddings in Scotland. Willie Johnson reports.
Love was in the air as 23 couples came to exchange vows in Gretna on this, the most romantic day of the year. Among them, the new Mr. and Mrs. Simons from Suffolk.
It's a special day for us because we've known each other 7 years and we met on Valentine's Day. So it's a very special and meaningful day for us, definitely.
And Kayleigh, why Gretna?
It's romantic and on our own, I think.
Yeah, we didn't want all the hassle. We got too many family members that we're just there to impress them, so we thought we'd do it for ourselves.
Runaways have been coming here for more than 360 years, and Gretna's romantic history remains the attraction for many.
Lots of stories and people have lots of anecdotes about this place, and that's part of the attraction. They love the story and the romance that goes along with those stories.
Numbers were down today from last year's 32 and the incredible 84 Valentine weddings in 2003. That was when civil marriages were allowed outside registration offices for the first time in Scotland. And today there was another first. Humanist weddings have been legal here since 2005, but only under temporary legislation. Today, the Humanist Society of Scotland was officially prescribed under law, meaning it now enjoys the same legal status for marriage as such as the Episcopal and Catholic churches.
We are now the only non-religious body to be prescribed in Scotland under the Marriage Act. So it's hugely significant and reflects the change in position, the rise of non-religious people in Scotland, and is now rightly reflected by a change in law.
But be the ceremony humanist, religious or civil, there is of course a common tradition: to seal it with a kiss. Willie Johnston, reporting Scotland, Gretna Green.
Well, it just so happens, talking of seals, a group of kayakers had an unexpected encounter as they paddled in the Firth of Forth. Yeah. They were filming their trip, as you do, when they were approached by this rather inquisitive seal near Inchholm Island. Oh my God. To their surprise, he decided to join them, and he seemed pretty relaxed and stayed with them for some time. It was so at ease that at one point the kayaker said it looked like it might even have a little sleep. Look. Aw. It was clever. It was having a little rest. Now, let's get the weather forecast from Christopher.
Jackie, thank you. Hello there, good evening to you. Some lovely spells of sunshine for some of us today. In fact, 14 degrees was the top temperature on the Isle of Skye. Thicker cloud towards the east coast and Tayside, so cooler here. But these figures borne out by our weather watchers. Beautiful blue skies on the west coast, the east coast, grey skies. But for many of us tonight, largely dry and fairly cloudy. Now, there will be some patchy outbreaks of rain around the west and southwest as a weak weather front works its way northwards, but many areas, as I say, dry. And there will be some clear conditions across parts of the East Highlands up towards Murray. That's where we'll have the coldest weather overnight. Touch of frost in the countryside. Elsewhere, around 5 Celsius, just about covers it. So tomorrow, and it's a largely cloudy day, reasonably dry, but once again, a very weak weather front in the west, bringing a few spots of rain, perhaps in towards the Glasgow area for a time as well, edging their way northwards. Best of the sunshine around the Moray Firth and North Aberdeenshire. But by mid-afternoon for central southern Scotland, largely cloudy and reasonably mild, 9-10 Celsius. Perhaps brightening up for a time around the Firth of Clyde, and certainly across eastern Scotland, much milder than today. Forget 5 Celsius, 10 for you tomorrow. And there's the best of the sunshine. Moray, northern Aberdeenshire up towards Caithness and indeed Orkney. Now, the rest of the afternoon into the evening and overnight, and we start to see another second heavier band of rain pushing in across western parts of the country, accompanied by a strengthening southerly wind, potentially touching gale force for the Western Isles later. Now, this change in the weather is all courtesy of this low pressure, which is going to work its way across the north of the country as we head through towards Thursday. And that means Thursday will be unsettled. By that, we mean cloudy, wet and breezy. And because the wind's coming in from the west, you'll feel that through the central belt as it funnels its way through. Drying up by the afternoon and once again, mild. Friday, high pressure sitting overhead, keeping things largely dry, mostly settled. Some sunshine in the east and once again mild. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you, Christopher. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. It's believed half of mental health problems begin before the age of 15, but some young people in Scotland are waiting more than a year to access a mental health service. And Donald Trump's presidency is just 24 days old, and already a key member of his team, his national security advisor, has been forced to resign. Michael Flynn quit overnight after it emerged that he'd misled the administration about his conversations with Russia's ambassador in Washington. And that's Reporting Scotland. Our main late evening news is at 10:25, but from all the team here, good evening.